What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? After more than 150 conversations with executives from companies like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, I've learned that sports is a common denominator. Some of our guests' athletic experiences earned them a place in their sports hall of fame, like Chick-fil-A chairman Dan Cathy. Some hung up their cleats after high school, like Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian, while others, like Condoleezza Rice, claim they weren't that great in their sport. But no matter their skill level, they have all told me that being a part of a team taught them leadership lessons that they still use today. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, I'm your host, Don Yeager, here to give you an all-access pass to genuine, authentic, fireside chat-like conversations with today's business icons so that you can create powerful change in your organization. This is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Omar Simmons, whose journey from track star to business executive is one we can all learn from. Starting in inner city Boston, Omar set records in high school and then at Princeton University, where he captained the track team. Transitioning from athletics to business, he became the managing director of Exaltare Capital Partners and led ECP Planet Fitness, expanding it from 15 to 100 units. Omar serves on the board of Urban Air, the Good Feet Store, and the International Franchise Association, embodying his belief that no one creates value by themselves. Now make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my notes from today's session. You'll find my favorite quotes and reflection questions that will help you integrate today's insights.
Culture is challenging. Leaders have an outsized impact on culture. The part that gets really tricky, though, is when you're scaling. You're going to shed some of the things that got you to this point. Sometimes the people change. Sometimes their roles change. Sometimes new people are added. Embrace that. We got to all get together in a room because we have a culture. What is it? Do we like it? Do we like certain aspects or not? And then let's tweak it so that we're explicit and intentional about what we're creating.
Omar, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Don. Really excited to have the conversation.
This could be great. You know, the first time you and I had the chance to connect, we were talking about sports, business, and you had a line that I wrote down because it was that impactful. It said, I went to some really esteemed schools, but I definitely learned more in sports than I did in anything else. I mean, that's the entire genesis of our podcast. Can you share one of those lessons from athletics with us?
Sure. The importance of being a great teammate / leader. A lot of the attributes are the same. Being a great teammate and leader means you have a good attitude and you're trying to advance everybody and make them play the best that they can play and be the best that they can be, because that advances everyone's shared mission. And as the leader, you often have to get people to sacrifice their natural tendencies to optimize self or their ego for the betterment of the team's mission. Nothing really encapsulates that as well in my life as sports. And when I became a leader, entrepreneur, CEO, it came more naturally to me because in sports it was understood that's the goal and that's what it takes. And another thing that's great about that is the essence of sports is you're playing to win. The game is dynamic. Challenges are inevitable, but you never change the mission. The commitment to the mission requires that when that adversity comes, you have to figure a way over it, around it, through it. That constant practice just gives you a particular mindset, a creativity, a strength. In sports, we call it heart, that I think is so applicable to every aspect of life. You know, instead of kind of whining or complaining about inevitable setbacks, you expect it, you almost relish it because it gives you an opportunity to show what you're made of. High school really jumps out at me right now. Pretty sure it was junior year. I was athletically in track, and I had moved up from the 600 yards. I think they had it. New England had these weird indoor distances, so they didn't always translate perfectly in other events. But I was kind of a 400, 800 runner. So I did the 600 a lot. And I was pretty dominant at the 600. And then I decided to move up to the 1,000. But the 1,000 had some really good milers in it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to win states. I'm going to break some records. Like, I'm going to dominate. And there was one guy in particular from Cambridge Ridge and Latin who was a really good miler. And everyone was just waiting for this battle between two guys from two different events to combine in one common weight class. I was scared and excited and pumped and trained like crazy and just felt really good. Now, around this time, I did have some minor injuries. I've had 6 knee surgeries since then, but at the time, my knees and shins and stuff were starting to get at me because having growth spurts and plates moving around. I didn't know all that at the time. I just knew they were achy. I was like, I just got to get through this season. I ended up getting chicken pox or something like right before the meet. I'm like, chicken pox? All things that take me out. Random. Like I'm training, I'm fighting through pain and injuries. So I missed a fair bit of training. I couldn't go out. I couldn't be around people for a week or two. I'm literally laying around, and it was really hard physically and mentally because part of training isn't just the physical, it's your edge.
Right.
I'm going to be at a big disadvantage. It was a lot of adversity because it was not just my physical ability, like was I in tip top shape, but my mental confidence was a little rocky.
Mm-hmm.
I had to put myself in the right frame of mind and candidly let go of the outcome. It was about just going out there and competing and doing the best I could. And I had no idea what my time might be or how well I was going to run because I didn't know what my body was capable of. I was fortunate. I did end up winning and I broke a record and I did really, really well. It was partly based on probably all the work I'd put in before that base, and partly just letting go and trusting that whatever the outcome, all I can really ask for is to do the best I could. And on that particular day, it was more than enough.
So that's such a powerful lesson. And it's one of those places where I'd love to learn from you. What did you learn then that you apply now to keep yourself in the mental game, even when it feels like things might be turning against you? Is there something you do? Is there a habit you've developed to help you be able to keep your mind in the right place?
Spiritual pursuit. Every morning I get up, read some of my Bible, try to pray, try to meditate. Being spiritually grounded. I probably didn't quite appreciate it as much at that time, but there is something about the separation between God's job, if you will, and my job. Part of what released me and kept me focused and constructive was this idea of letting go of the outcome. I don't control that.
Mm.
What am I responsible for is prepare as well as I can, focusing on what I can control and what's really expected of me to compete as hard as I can, to try to be as smart as I can, and to enjoy the moment. When I get back into those principles, good things tend to happen.
Mm.
It's almost like we all have, by aging myself, you remember the little cartoons when I think it was like the Flintstones, he'd have a little angel on one shoulder and a little devil on another shoulder.
Right.
Okay, I hear what the devil's saying and hear what the angel's saying, and I'm going to focus more on what the angel's saying. Yeah, the devil's going to say some stuff, but I don't have to buy into it. I can hear it and say, I am choosing to focus on what's going to be edifying and constructive and not adding on to all the noise that's out there that takes me out of my game.
Right.
There's always noise. And if you're not whole as a leader, my firm belief is whatever you are gets magnified throughout an organization. If you're a little insecure or a little unconfident or a little unsure, it becomes a big ripple effect throughout your organization. And so the more whole you can be, the more focused, the more clear, the better for everybody else around you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Track and field is often considered an individual sport. it's you versus the clock and some other opponents on the track. But you talked about being a great teammate and a great leader. How did that develop in a track and field background?
Yeah, that's a great question because people do think about that. I played a lot of different sports when I was young. So I kind of followed the seasons in my neighborhood. It was football during football season, basketball during basketball season, track in the summer. And then in high school, I realized I'm particularly good at track. I should probably focus. And there were a group of guys, we're extremely close to this day. Our nickname was PCD, Polo Crew Down. We all ran track. We had to support each other because track became more than just a sport. It literally was a way of life. We grew up in a tough neighborhood, poverty, violence. We used track to keep us out of all of that stuff and give us hope that we could be more and ultimately go places that not everybody in our community knew how to go to. It gave me a path to college, for example, and kept us out of trouble and gave us something constructed to work towards. So while I individually got a lot of accolades, there's no way I could have achieved anything without those brothers. We pushed each other every day. I mean, there would be times after track meets, we're like, all right, let's just do stairs. We're just going to run up and down the stairs and just compete. We'd ride our bikes. We're going to compete on riding the bikes. Like we're just pushing each other every day. And look, we didn't have great facilities. We ran in the hallways and we made each other better. Track was the vehicle, but it wasn't the only thing. My success as an athlete and as a leader is something that we gave to each other as teammates.
Mm.
And then ultimately, we cared about not only our small crew, the PCD crew, but we also cared about representing our school. We wanted to win cities and we wanted to win states. So while it seems like an individual sport, people sacrifice. I'll run the mile, I'll run the 4x1 relay, I'll do X, I'll do Y, because that's going to help the team. And by focusing on helping the team, we all got better as individuals. You know, one of the funny things about track, you almost always run faster in a relay than you do in your individual race.
Mm.
Some of that might be just the mechanics of you get a little bit of a running start sometimes. But I firmly believe as humans, we are capable of more than we necessarily realize. And you get more out of yourself when you're doing something in service of others than you are doing in service of yourself.
Mm.
When you feel like you're doing something for a bigger purpose and for some other people, you get more out of yourself. And that's just a beautiful thing that I would see on a regular basis, even in a quote unquote individual sport like track.
You know, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever read that. What a fascinating concept that if the idea that I don't want to let you down. So when it's me running against opponents, I don't want to let me down. But if I've got to take something from you and then carry it to someone else, I now have a responsibility to the parties on both ends. So Planet Fitness, you were leader there for 9 years. And in that window, you take them from 15 units to 100 units, an extraordinary growth rate. How did all of this about learning how to be in service of each other and some of these things play into your leadership of those who are going to help you grow at Planet Fitness?
It was central. I mean, look, I was a private equity investor. So I invested and bought a lot of businesses and I would work with management teams, but I was kind of a third base coach. You invest, give them some advice, but you're kind of holding them accountable for delivering the results. And then I buy these 15 Planet Fitness franchise businesses and I kind of realize I look around that I'm the best guy to be the CEO. I didn't want to be the CEO and I didn't think of myself as an operator. There's a bit of an artificial construct sometime in our industry where you're like an investor or you're an operator, either or. I realized that I'm kind of both and I'm capable of doing both. Like any good player or teammate, I can play more of one role or more another role depending upon what the other teammate's best attributes are.
Mm-hmm.
The business that I bought needed leadership. And I was kind of the strategic architect of the deal. I was the one that knew what it was. I knew all the things wrong with it. And I knew what it needed to look like at the end.
Mm.
Me and my partners agreed I should formalize my leadership as CEO because they needed someone to kind of look to. Okay, fine. That was going to be an interim thing. Maybe that's a couple of months, ends up being a couple of years. So we end up growing the business from like 15 units to over 50 pretty quickly, 2.5 years. Then I realized I can still be a leader, but I don't be the best person to be CEO. So we brought in a different CEO and we had built up the management team and I became executive chairman. We go through this second phase of growth where I'm still very involved, but I'm playing a different role. Again, in service of what's best for the team, not what's best for my ego or best for maybe even my pocketbook, and double the business again. So we go to like 100 plus units. We're like, okay, we're going to sell the business. Everything's gone probably better than planned, if I'm being honest. And that's rare in entrepreneurial pursuits. And we're getting ready to sell, and then COVID hits.
Right.
Economically, it's devastating. $250 million of debt, over 100 landlords, over 1,500 employees that we had to end up laying off or furloughing. Again, I had to think about being a steward of the organization. All the equity value that had accrued to the business was basically wiped out. You had no earnings. You had no prospects of earnings. I mean, I couldn't pay myself. At that point, you're trying to keep the patient alive in hopes that it will survive. And over time, it will kind of earn back some of its equity value and ability to employ people and serve our customers. And for about a year, we were just making some tough decisions, but they were all, again, in service of let's just stay in the game. Let's keep this thing alive. And we looked up and was like, okay, we not only survived, but we probably took a little bit of market share. 25% of our competitors had kind of gone out of business.
And they're not coming back. I mean, the upside for you is that the strength built by the brand and by the largeness of the organization, you had the ability to come back when others just had to shut down.
No question. And look, we were fortunate. Planet Fitness was the biggest brand in the industry. We came together as a brand and as a team, and we were one of the largest franchisees in the system. We talked to the governors of all the states we were in: New York, Connecticut, Tennessee, Georgia, New Mexico, parts of Canada. And we could say, look, this is our playbook of how we're going to keep people safe.
Right.
Those regulations not only kept people safe, but they also probably helped tilt things a little bit in our way because we could do things that other people couldn't because of our scale and our processes. Long story short, it gave us a slight advantage when we reopened, and we ended up selling the business for the same type of value we probably could have pre-COVID because we just tried to do the right thing. And again, there was no particular end in mind. It wasn't like we were like, oh, let's tee this thing up to be sold. I'm still an owner in the business. We sold the majority to a really good firm. But at the end of the day, all we were trying to do is put one foot in front of the other, make this the best business that it could, serve customers well, and good things happen. Sometimes you just got to be in the game to get lucky.
Well, you said it right there at the end, that idea that you just try to do the right thing. And if you can keep yourself in the game, you still have an opportunity to win. And the challenge is, what did you have built up for you in advance, not just in the measurement of size, but also in the measurement of goodwill that helped make a difference with customers and other people?
Yeah, I mean, that investment in goodwill is everything. It's almost like a trust deposit. What do you have in the emotional bank account? When I had to get up in front of people, employees, and say, look, it looks really dark. We're going to be okay. You had to have had some reservoir of trust built up.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell a landlord, like, I don't have any money, you got to believe that I'm going to figure out a way to pay you. You have to have trust built up. When I tell my lenders, look, we're going to figure out a way to pay you. We just need you to be patient, not pull the plug and do something stupid. Things you had done before gave you the space to stay in the game. And then you had to make good choices, the least bad choice in a lot of cases during the difficult times, so that you were around when the opportunities present itself. And again, it's very similar to sports.
Yep.
Unexpected things happen, injuries, foul trouble, whatever. And you're like, I got to hang in there so I can make a push at the end. That's kind of what happened. And the business is so much stronger for it now. And as a leader, I feel like I'm much stronger for it. And I know our team was stronger for it. Those sort of lessons, I think, are just takeaways that you can take with you. They say that what challenges you only makes you stronger.
Right. Really important lesson in all that. Too often we think of investments in goodwill and building a reservoir of trust and all of those things, those phrases as soft skills. You can't put those on a balance sheet. But when times get tough, they are on the balance sheet.
Mhm.
And that is our job, even in the very best of times, to constantly be building that reservoir.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I'm a finance guy, so it's all got to be on the balance sheet or income statement. But because of my athletic heart, there's something deep in there in yourself and in your team and in how much you trust another person or an institution. That's a compounding asset that can feel invisible, but it's one that you can take advantage of when needed.
Don't you wish we could get you finance guys to find a way to put it on the balance sheet, though?
Yeah, see if they can underwrite that.
Take that to Goldman Sachs.
Hey, I think it's a pretty important asset.
There we go.
No question.
So, I know one of the things that's important to you, you talk about culture a lot. One of the great challenges, anytime you're growing so exponentially, how do you ensure growth? The bigger you get, the harder it is to extend that culture. What lesson did you learn through all of that growth that you might teach me on how to keep culture alive?
Great question. And look, I'd be the first to say I'm as much of a student as I am a practitioner in that regard. Culture is challenging. I guess I lead by example. How do you treat people? How do you make decisions? How do you be? Because leaders have an outsized impact on culture. And I'm not one that necessarily tries to proactively architect culture, which is a strength and a weakness. Every institution and group of people have a culture, whether it's intentional or unintentional.
Right.
It really comes down to like, what do you value and what do you reward and what do you punish? A lot of that happens organically. So when I look at firms that have all these platitudes on walls and stuff, I'm like, I don't think it changes behavior. It doesn't help people make a decision between X and Y. Some of culture is organic. And when you're growing that fast, it's very organic. Some of it, though, is pretty intentional. What we tried to do is articulate it as best as we could. The part that gets really tricky, though, is when you're scaling. By definition, you're going to shed and change some of the things that got you to this point. Sometimes the people change, sometimes their roles change, sometimes new people are added. Rather than fight that, in my experience, you got to embrace that. Then the real trick is, what is sacrosanct? What's enduring? Instead of talking about culture in this amorphous way, what are the 2 or 3 principles where you say, no matter what, we ain't changing this? And what are ones that are in service of the organization for a season, but you got to hold them lightly because they may not be in service of the company forever. That's the trick.
Right.
It's dynamic, but we were more than doubling every single year. So I try to think of culture as, look, it's the unwritten rules. If you're not in the room and there's no regulation, what decision do you want someone to make between choice A and choice B?
Right.
How do you inculcate that? Which ones are most important and which ones are like, it's a judgment call. You can't have a million of them.
No.
But you got to have a small number of things where you say, this is what we're about. For us, it was things like being performance oriented in service of others. We had to perform and win games. We can't help anybody. Things like growth. And it wasn't just growth in new units and growth in profits. It was growth personally and professionally, because at the end of the day, our business was a people business. That was always the bottleneck to our growth. We had to have really good people delivering really good service, and that's all we had. But because you're always bringing in new people, you can't grow at that rate. You have to have something that you stand for, and you have to shed people that either weren't growing or didn't value growth.
Right. Yeah.
There's a degree of intentionality. There's a degree of allowing things to develop organically, and there's a degree of kind of working together as a team, because a lot of times people are like, well, Omar, you're the leader. You say what the culture is. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm not even out there serving anybody. We got to all get together in a room because we have a culture. What is it? Do we like it? Do we like certain aspects or not? And then let's tweak it so that we're explicit and intentional about what we're creating.
Where we're going to go next. Yeah. You know, I want to ask you about your childhood. Your dad was a jazz musician. He was on the road often, touring with amazing artists. And you and your mom moved from apartment to apartment. And you actually mentioned that doing so forced you to prove yourself in new schools, new neighborhoods over and over again. How did that childhood experience influence your approach to building relationships?
Yeah, again, a great question. It's funny. It seemed like we'd be going like from New York City to Florida. I mean, we'd be moving like 5, 10 minute drive, but the neighborhood seemed so different, completely different dynamics. No one knew you. You're the new kid. People trying to punk you. And sports was the safety net for me.
Yeah,
It was a place where I could get common respect.
so true.
Like, oh, okay, this guy's good. He belongs. He can add value. That was my currency to respect and having fun and connecting with people and keeping me out of trouble. It helped me define common ground with anybody, irrespective of race, class, creed. We all have more in common than we have apart. It helped me look for the divine in each individual, the gift, the superpower. In the business I'm in, I get to work with extraordinary people, but I also work with people that are extraordinarily different than me and sometimes have categorically different interests than me. I have to find that common ground, those safe spaces. And then over time, I have to be pretty clear on who I am and what I stand for. And if you don't really like me or you're not feeling it, that's okay. It's not the same failure consequences now as it was back then when I might get my head bashed in by somebody. You don't want to do a deal with me? You don't think I'm the best partner? That is perfectly fine. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. I think we could coalesce around this area, but if it doesn't work for you, God bless you. Let's keep it moving.
I love that line about trying to look for superpowers in other people so that you can get to know them better. If they looked at you, what's Omar Simmons' superpower?
Yeah, it's always harder to see in yourself. Uh, I probably have a bit of a unique perspective, as we all do, because of my unique background. I have been a highly competitive athlete that shaped me. I grew up in some, you know, neighborhoods where you had to learn survival, high consequential decisions with real repercussions. And those reps stick with you, but give you a certain confidence. Like, I can handle the weight, I can make big calls. I've had extraordinary education, exposed to the best minds in the world. And I've been able to cooperate with, compete with, work with all those different types of people. When I look at a problem or situation, it's not through the same conventional eyes as other people. I'm very rooted spiritually and very grounded analytically and financially. Any one of those things isn't unique, but that combination creates, I don't know, a special gumbo, if you will, that maybe allows me to look at the world a little bit differently. And success is a team sport. I'm sure I have an ego as much as anybody, and I try to manage it. I'll let my wife or my boys manage it for me. But at the end of the day, I don't have to have all the answers. I just got to get the right people in the right room,
Mm.
set the right process, build the right culture so people feel safe being their best self, and good things will happen. I think those are things that maybe I'm pretty good at, but you'd have to ask other people because I'm not really sure.
All right, but there's one there that I want to dig into real quick. You said, I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to get the right people in the right room. Is there something you can teach the rest of us on how to look at a situation and say, here are the people to put in the right room to help us make best choices?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Look, I think as a leader, a big part of the job is framing situations, opportunities, and threats. Okay, what am I trying to achieve? What do I control? What do I not control? What do I influence? And then you have different sets of problems and opportunities. And what are the priorities? Where should I spend my time? What are areas that can create really high value, or in some cases, keep value from being destroyed, and that we can affect. If it's a solvable problem, fixable flaw, growth opportunity, or area, then you go, look, this can be done. Even though I don't have to know how to do it, but I'll let you know it's achievable. Somebody in the world exists that can help us figure this out.
Mhm.
And sometimes there's component parts because, like, when we're doing some of the stuff with Planet Fitness, we had never done it before. Maybe people weren't scaling that fast, but somebody knew part of the answer. Then the trick is working your own personal network and your team and saying, look, do you have the answer? Let's be honest. How much of the answer do you have? And who might have the answer? Getting the right people around the problem. If you frame the problem right and you get people focused on it, people can do extraordinary things if there's the will.
Yep.
And then there has to be a real commitment to getting the right answer above being right. Intellectual humility, seeking truth is a completely different thing than winning some argument. That almost takes a scientific, maybe a religious approach. That's a cultural thing. Can you get people to focus on, like, you think you're right, and maybe you are, but let's explore alternative views. At the end of the day, if you're right, you're going to be right. And if you're not, the team's going to be better. It doesn't matter who got the right answer. It just matters that we get the right answer.
Yeah.
I think you got to know the individuals in the room and their tendencies. So you get what I call the loud and proud folk. You know what's on their mind. There's saying it clearly, loudly, and they're proud to be right. And sometimes those are the people you have to say, okay, we heard your point of view. Maybe you could focus on listening or taking notes for us. And then there's the quiet killers, really, really smart, but their standards for what's right and their confidence intervals have to be so high that they may not say it. They could be 99% sure and they're going to say a word.
Mm.
So then you got to draw those people out. Hey, you haven't said much. What's on your mind?
Right.
As a leader, I kind of feel like, or even as a contributor, my role is to say, you guys get to work because you're smarter than me and I can maybe help talk about it. But I find that exhilarating. That teamwork is exciting. That's something that can be done anytime, but you can't do it all the time on every issue. That's where the real prioritization takes. Like, look, you can't do everything all at the same time, but you can make some real strides.
Love it. Comes down to knowing your people, knowing what to expect from them, and being able to kind of shape each one of them into playing a role that might be outside of what they're naturally doing. The loud and proud and quiet killers. One question we've asked almost every guest for 4 years now is around the concept of teams. You've talked about teamwork. You've built teams at Planet Fitness. Most corporate organizations refer to themselves as teams, but I think generally inappropriately. They're not really teams. They're just a bunch of people working together. If you were coaching me as a young leader, I've got a group of people and I want to shape them. I want to help them become a team. Give me a couple things that I can do to help take a group of people and try to build them into a team.
So the first is they got to be a shared mission. Like, what are we all here for? To your point, you can work together. You have nothing in common. That's not a team to me. You learn that in sports. The second thing is sometimes you got to break it up into subcomponents or smaller objectives.
Mm-hmm.
You want to win the Super Bowl? Well, first you got to learn the playbook, or first you got to get the offensive lineman to coordinate, and you got to make the playoffs. And so you got to get these sub goals that gets people focused. Third, kind of got to get the teammates right. One of the things that's been hard for me, but I've had to learn, is a big collection of talent isn't always the best team.
Mm-hmm.
It's the chemistry and compatibility of the team. It's dynamic. Everyone contributes in their own way. Do I have the right contributors for this particular mission? If you have, again, a collection of individuals, that's not a team. But if you have a mission, clear objectives, and people know why they're on the team and how they contribute to the outcome, it makes things a lot easier. And it also allows differences to not be viewed as primarily negative, because now it's positive. They're different because they're better at something than maybe you are. And you need that to reach our ultimate mission. as opposed to like, oh gosh, this guy never sees things my way.
Yeah,
It's the exact opposite of that. It's additive, not subtractive to you.
I love it. Now, most of us who love sports believe they can see or feel momentum shifts in competitions. And I believe that's true in business too. Is there a moment or an event or a choice or a decision that you've made that you believe kind of shifted the momentum and allowed momentum to really take shape in your business endeavors?
When I left private equity to become an entrepreneur, that was a momentum shifter because it was starting from scratch and I had to redefine myself. And I remember I had this talk with my wife, like, hey, I like this. I'm gonna buy a business, I'm gonna do all this stuff. It might take a while. You might even have to go get a job at Starbucks so you can go get some health care. But I really like this. And I think I'm gonna be really good at it. And she heard it as you've been doing this for a couple of months. And you tell me go get a job at Starbucks. You must not have a lot of confidence that this is gonna work. So we were kind of talking past each other. But when I started, it was like neutral. And then I started seeing success. I would meet entrepreneurs and I could see a connection with them. And I was meeting capital partners and I could see how all the puzzle pieces fit together. It just was going to take some time. And once I found Planet Fitness and we got that deal done and we had a chance to grow, you just felt like you were going downhill, or like a track would say, you had the wind at your back.
Right.
Winning makes you want to win more.
Yeah. So we're going to put a link in the show notes to what IFA and you're doing to try to raise the profile of what franchising can mean and do in the lives of other people, because I think it's really important. I love what IFA is doing there. I love what I've learned about franchising through that organization. But can you describe the initiative and maybe a little bit of why it's so important to you?
Sure. The Franchise Ascension Initiative is an accelerator program to help people that are at the margins that maybe don't think they can own a business or create wealth, get that talent that's on the sidelines into a program where they can learn the basics, business ownership and franchising. And our goal is to encourage more inclusivity and more diversity in the franchising industry, particularly in franchise ownership. There's a lot of different types of people that work in franchises or even are customers of franchises. But a lot of people in my neighborhood, Black and brown people in particular, that maybe come from lower socioeconomic environments, that just couldn't dream of owning a business or don't think they're capable of it. I know they're capable of it because I was that kid. I grew up to do it. We've been blessed to get exposed to franchising and to create value and wealth through franchising. And we want to extend that gift to others. This accelerator program in partnership with IFA is selecting in our first cohort, maybe 15 people. We're going to invest and pour in them some of the basics that we already know about owning a business and being successful and learning about franchising. But we're also going to pair them up with mentors and a community that's invested in their success, because one's entrepreneurial journey doesn't end after a 6-month program. What's been great about it is there's so many franchise businesses that have kind of invested in this alongside of us. My wife and I kind of kicked it off, but there were so many people that want more talent into franchising. How do we expand the tent so that we get talent that otherwise wouldn't be considered?
Right.
That's the goal. Like, let's go places where we don't get great players and let's get our scouts out there and then let's coach them up and let's get more talent on the field so that we can all win more games. That's kind of the idea behind the Ascension Initiative.
I love it. Omar, I thank you today. I feel like I've learned buckets here, including the idea that I could be faster helping somebody run a relay.
We might have to get out there, Don, get you out there, brother.
I have to go practice my sprints. Anyway, grateful that you made the time today to become a corporate competitor with us and make us better. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thanks, Don.
Man, amazing guy. First, the idea that you're faster in a relay than you are when you're running by yourself. Now, there are a handful of reasons for that, but among them is the idea that you're actually running for someone else. shared responsibility is what makes for some really incredible achievements if we can make sure the handoff is done well as well. Second, as you're going through tough times, the reservoir of trust that you built in the good times will have a huge impact. It's funny, he's a finance guy and he generally likes things that can show up in a profit and loss statement. This one can't. Still, if you can actually have that reservoir built in the good times, it allows you to have great outsized impact when things get tough. Third, he talked about culture. Boy, it's so tactical, his discussions there, especially if your company gets the opportunity to grow. How do you maintain that culture? How do you actually make sure it's even a bedrock of everything you're going to be? There are seasonal parts of your culture as well as enduring pieces of your culture. And being able to define both are really, really important. I've never quite heard anyone put it that way. It was impactful. And then finally, he talked about the importance of when you are trying to build a collaborative environment, know the people in the room. You're pulling people together. Some are loud and proud, some are quiet killers. He talked about the intellectuals. While you're blending all those people to build collaboration, how do you make sure that you know those people well enough that you can call them out and bring everybody together to get to the right answer, not that anybody needs to be right? So powerful. I know I'm a better leader today because I had this conversation with Omar, and I hope you are as well. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify. Feedback helps us spread the insights of our guests to a wider audience. It actually increases our ratings. Thank you so much for those who have done so in the past. And catch new episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe at corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to be the first to get a chance to listen. And as a thank you gift, I will send you a chapter from one of my best-selling books. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @DonYaeger, DonYaeger. And until next week, I appreciate you.